day of April. Glad everyone could come. This is a big crowd today. Thank heavens it's not raining yet. So I'm going to invite Jack Butler to come up, and he's going to lead us in prayer. So I'm going to invite, while he's coming up, that all of you who can, please stand for the prayer.
It's nice to have the good health. Amen. Would you bow with me for a word of prayer? Thank you, Father, for this day and for allowing all of us to be a part of it. On these last few beautiful spring days, I am reminded of a trip my wife and I, when we attended the Omaha beach area, and we walked the cemetery that included row after row of white crosses indicating burial of one of our servicemen heroes. And today, as I enjoy the changing of seasons, I think of those crosses and the loss of so many fine Americans who will never have another spring to enjoy. My prayer today needs to include mention of our Easter celebration coming this Sunday, when we celebrate the risen Lord. And then one other mention in our prayer. Last night I watched the blast off of 4 of our astronauts, now in space, totally dependent on mechanical and what's going on. So I ask your blessing on what they're doing. Please bring them home safe when they finish their chore. I pray in your holy name, Father. Amen.
Amen.
Introduce Larry Head, who is going to lead us in prayer in pledge and in the national anthem.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in singing the national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Where's Jason?
Good morning. Got a few announcements before we get done with, before we introduce our main speaker. If you want to listen to any of this or see these, we have them on our website video. So if you have friends that want to hear Jim Pfister talk, we'll have it up in about a week, and it'll be there forever, as long as everything works all right. But any other previous talks, we have it on our website, so you're more than welcome to do that. This last person that sang, his name's Larry Ed. He went to Rex Mundy High School, no longer in existence now. But he does our newsletter, and our newsletter is the history of our museum, and he's been doing it for the last several years. He does a good job. If you want on the newsletter, you can ask, and we will send one to you. Come bug him. He's in the front row over here. And he'll send you a newsletter, and he keeps up with things, and it really does a very good job. What we have coming up is a lot of things. I just want to tell you a few things. I won't bore you too long, but on the next week, a week from today, if you sign up, and Meredith will have a sign-up list, and we have 4 pretty young ladies out front that will sign you up for next week. Next week is Don Ballard. He's a Medal of Honor recipient. There's 61 to 64 of them living this day and age. Close to 3,600 of them, mostly from the Civil War, but it's an honor to have him. We had another one from Indiana that talked here a few years ago at Crossroads, and you have to give me his name. I've had it several times, but he's from Indiana, and it filled the place up with 3,000 recipients. So we'd like you to be here. You have to sign up because we're going to run out of room. If you don't make it here, you can't sign up. You can go to University of Southern Indiana. It's open to the public on April 8th. That's a Wednesday, a week from yesterday. A week from tomorrow is when he will talk here, and you're more than welcome. We're making it special for you. I want to thank the Westside Nut Club. Some of you are nut clubbers, but the Westside Nut Club is going to have a day here on May 9th. We're going to be closed that Saturday, and they're going to lay some concrete, 30 by 60 feet out here, rock on the other side, paint the place. There's about 150 of them, and they are donating their time and their service, and we couldn't be happier with that. It makes a big difference. We could never do a capital project like that on our own without a lot of support. Mr. Green, will you stand up? I have a World War II veteran here in our sites. This is John Green. And we don't get that very often. John Green. World War II and Korean. Rare to have veterans of both wars. I will tell you what's coming up next week, the next period of time, just so you know. Don Ballard, I just said, but the week after that's Roberta Hyman. She used to write for the newspaper, and she's an excellent writer. She wrote the summary of the University of Southern Indiana, has a book out on Southern Indiana. She does an excellent job. But her real claim to fame is Albion Fellows Bacon. This lady was the most significant individual in the 20th century of women. She just did remarkable things for women, voting for women, workers. And if you look at the YWCA, there's a big plaque in memory of her. But Albion Fellows Bacon did a lot for women in World War I as well, so she'll talk about that. Bill McNeese will talk about a base hospital out of Indianapolis the next week. He's an anesthesiologist, and he's talked a lot about our World War I room here as well. Don Simpson will talk about if we have a disaster here. He's been running the disasters in Evansville for about 35 years. So if we had an earthquake, if we had a tornado, if we had anything, how do you react if we had an earthquake? Deaconess is not going to be very helpful downtown because the big pipe for the water is right under Columbia. And it's all kinds of things going to happen to the Gateway and also the St. Mary's Place because a lot of it's on quicksand. I don't want to scare you. But, then Amy Grohl is going to talk about the Holocaust, art and Holocaust. Jim Canary's in charge of the Lilly collection. And who was the guy that was the big football guy? Israel. He's in charge of all his collection for the last 40 years, or 30 years. He looks like Santa Claus, but he'll show up to talk about the Lilly collection and how the Lilly archives things. Remember, Lilly's our biggest plant, but this is now the biggest in the United States and the biggest for Indiana. So they've helped us out with doing archives of Ken Wilson. So we're very fortunate to have them. just a little bit about, we're going to have a guy talk, Jim Pfister's going to talk, about prisoners of war. I'll just give you some statistics that are pretty amazing. If you look at World War I, 96% of captured people returned and were repatriated. 4,100 were captured in World War I, about 3,900 came back. So that was a fairly high percentage. You go to Vietnam, I get varied statistics, and Jim Fincher's going to talk about Vietnam, but either 800 or 761 were captured, and 591 returned. That's a return rate of about 74 to 78%. So he's one of the returnees. There's lots that didn't return, and he'll talk a little bit of MIAs, missing in action. We'll just talk about prisoners of war. The Gulf War, which I was in, there were 29 captured and 21 came back. That's not a very high percentage rate either. That's a 72% comeback rate. World War II, lots of captured. The size of our city is about 150,000. So 130,000 were captured and 116,000 came back. So the return rate on that is 89%. Civil War, the Union, we had about 210,000 captured, 30,000 died. The return rate, from what I can find, is about 86%. And then with the Southerners, there's 426,000 that were captured and 20,000 came back. So that rate for the rebels was a lot better percent of coming back. You heard of the Anderson prison that was terrible down in Georgia, I believe the name of it. Then for the Revolutionary War, we had 20,000 soldiers that were captured and 8,000 were killed. So you had a return rate of about 58% or so. So here's a guy right here, 800 captured, and we had a return rate of close to 591. So return rate of 75%. He's in that 75% of prisoners of war. And, you know, if I had to go to jail, I didn't last very long, but these prison places were worse than our jails. So I think you just gotta, he came back normal, but a lot of guys don't. There's a lot of PTSD from this. If you study World War I, tons of PTSD from World War I that we didn't even know what it was. And even though he came back, those memories probably haven't left him totally. I just think of things that could have happened to you, but this guy is amazing. 5 years over there in the prison camp in Vietnam. So we are so lucky to hear him talk. Here's Jim Pfister. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Hello. God. Holy smokes. Now you know why I don't like cell phones. I like to make a correction on the normal. It's AB normal is what I am. My name is Jim Pfister, and first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for attending this event. I would like to thank the staff of the Evansville War Museum for the opportunity to do this. I would like to thank all the veterans, present and past, for paying their dues. So, veterans, thank you very much. What I'd like to do is start out with a short bio on how things progressed. I joined the Army in Indianapolis at 17 years old, went to Fort Knox for basic training. They asked me what field I was interested in. I told them combat engineers and infantry. So after basic training, they sent me to clerical school. I said, well, I think I've got this figured out. They're going to teach me how far to throw the typewriter at the enemy. So they sent me to personnel at Fort Knox, banging on a typewriter, and I kept saying, I told my section sergeant, I have got to get out of here. Well, he finally come up to me one day and he says, Pfister, I've got an opening to a restricted area overseas. I said, I'll take it. I know where it's at. Let's go. So they flew us to Tacoma, Washington in 1966. And 23 days later, on a General Simon B. Buckner troop carrier, I spent on the ocean going to Vietnam. I got to Vietnam at Vung Tau. It was an R&R center for the U.S. soldiers, for the New Zealanders, for the Australians, and also for the Viet Cong and NBA. It was R&R center for everyone. And I didn't quite like banging on a typewriter again. So I volunteered to be a helicopter door gunner. I think the life expectancy on that was 2 days or less, maybe. So I got to my unit, and the executive officer is sitting at the desk, and he says, can I help you? And I said, I have orders assigning me to the 71st Assault Helicopter Company as a door gunner. He said, I can read. I said, I'm just letting you know, a door gunner, not a clerk, not a truck driver, a door gunner. So he said, when do you want to start flying? I said, tomorrow morning. He said, my God, you just got here. I said, you just asked me. This is not difficult, it really isn't. So I started flying, and I flew in slicks. We were flying resupply and carrying rice to Vietnamese villages and carrying troops. And I said, this is not good. So they had an opening for the gunships. I'll do it. So a month and a half later, I got shot down. So the next morning, we were captured by the North Vietnamese. They tied us up with commo wire around our neck, our wrists, and about 5 hours later, our hands were about this big around, cut off the circulation. Thank God they didn't cut off circulation around my neck. Holy smokes. So 11 days later, we got to our first camp, and one of the prisoners that was already there, Francis Cannon, he had been hit with a mortar. He had a hole the size of a silver dollar in his neck with maggots falling out of it. And I said, somebody needs to clean this guy up. And nobody would, I said, Cannon, you come with me. So I had one of the guards in the camp give me a bar of soap, and I took Cannon down to the creek and gave him a bath and cleaned the wound out. And all the time I'm cleaning that wound out, I'm going, bloop. So that was my first check on reality. And as years went by, I was one of 7 or 8 people that had to do the hard labor. Carry wood, carry grass, carry food. And I broke my back in a helicopter crash on top of all this, so I had to do heavy labor. And we had rice 3 times a day, but everything that crawled on the ground I would kill. I've eaten rats, snakes, lizards, everything that crawled, I hit it with a piece of wood or a club and killed it and ate it. It was a necessity. They only gave us food, like every 3 months, and that was pig fat. So that you're sort of on your own. In that course of 1968, we had 6 people that died in my camp. And one gentleman that died, Joseph Zaltaki, he was the 7th person that died. I was sitting with him that day, and he looked at me and he said, Jim? I said, yeah. He said, am I going to die? I said, yep, you are. He said, can you do me a favor? I said, yeah. He said, wake me when it's over. I said, I'll do that. So I have a DVD, a documentary that was made on me and my pilot in 2018, and it's titled, Wake Me When It's Over. But, so, after all the deaths and everything, In 1971, early, helicopters flew over our head. And I walked out the end of the hooch and looked up at the guy in the helicopter sitting right in the doorway. And then I looked behind me, and there was a guard with a rifle pointed at me. And I went, well, and all of a sudden, helicopters flew off. They just left us. And I said, wow, that's really disheartening. And I found out in 1969, the commanders in Vietnam and their units received a directive from Washington saying that they were not to send any equipment or personnel out to make any rescue missions. So that was the first day in my life I understood what the meaning expendable meant. Well, we're actually all expendable. If you quit your job and you get fired, you're replaced a week or 2 weeks later. So we're all expendable in a sense. So I said, oh my God, I said, now what? So the camp commander came down and said, we're moving camp. I said, well, I figured that much since the choppers found our camp. I said, where are we moving to? He said, North Vietnam. I said, you're joking. He said, no, I'm not joking. So they walked us from South Vietnam to North Vietnam. It took 58 days. I tell people I was 6'2" when I started and 5'5" when I got up there. That don't fly too well. But I joke about a lot of stuff, and this is my way of coping with everything. Every day that I wake up, I think about the 8 guys that I helped bury. It never stops. Every day I think about this. I don't care if I'm watching TV, playing golf, cutting the grass, it doesn't make any difference. I always think about these guys and the guilt feeling on why did I make it back and they didn't. I mean, I don't know what the rhyme or reason is, but it's post-traumatic stress, and that's a part of post-traumatic stress. So they got us up to North Vietnam. It was the old French buildings from the Dien Bien Phu in 1954. And they were nicer than living in a thatched roof with bamboo beds. Of course, we slept on pallets. I slept on wooden beds for 5 years and 2 months. I had bed sores. So we get to North Vietnam, and they put us on a train, cattle car for the last 150 miles. And there's 200 South Vietnamese soldiers in this cattle car, and 4 of us. And one of them said something that I really didn't like, and I went over there and popped him. I said, you don't say that about Americans. And my buddy says, come here a minute. I said, what's up? He says, have you taken a look at the odds here, Pfister? I said, well, 50 to 1. Hell, that ain't too bad, is it? So anyway, they took me down to the shower one day, and the guard that was standing out the door, I was whistling, and he knocked on the door and he opened it up and he says, no. I said, So he walked away and I started whistling again. And he opened up the door and pointed the rifle, and I went, have it. You got the weapon. And I said, come here. I said, well, they marched me off to my little solitaire room. 5 days later, they pulled me out of solitaire and they says, you gonna break the camp rules again? I said, there's a good possibility I probably will. Well, a month later, I was back in solitaire again, except this time with leg irons. So, did I learn my lesson? Not really, not really. The main thing that I'm trying to get to is I tried resisting the enemy the best means that I could, because escape was far and few between. Major Rowe escaped from North Vietnam, but he had underground help. Okay? So trying to get out of Vietnam on your own was really a one-trick pony. So this was my way of resisting to the best ability, that I knew how. So they put us in this room, all 30 of us, and I was the second group to come out of Vietnam. And we got back to the Philippines, and they said, "What do you want to eat?" And I said, "I want a hamburger, Coca-Cola, and a pizza." So that's exactly what they brought me. Then I got back to Fort Knox again. And I decided to stay in the military and make a career out of it, so I re-enlisted, stayed in the military, retired in 1986. And when I retired, from 1986 to 1992, I went through about 12 or 13 jobs. I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to be doing. If I didn't like what the manager or boss was doing, I threw my keys at him and said, "Have a nice life." "Well, where do you want us to send your paycheck?" I said, "Just keep it. I put it in your gas tank. I don't care what you do with it." In 1992, I got hired with the state of Indiana at the employment office as a veterans representative. The most rewarding job I ever had in my entire life. So I worked there for 18 years. I retired again in 2010, and that's when I said, I call it quits. That's it. Now I work on my golf game and cutting grass. That's it. So, I hope I didn't bore you, but this has been my life. I'll be 78 years old in June, and hoping like, I'll make it 2 more months, but I really want to thank you for your participation and attendance. And I'd like to open this up, if I can, to question and answer. I'll answer any question that you got. You may not like the answer, but I'll answer it. Yes, sir. We were released. They signed a peace agreement.
Repeat the question.
How was I released? They signed the peace agreements. It took them over a year to decide on the shape of the table. And I said, "Listen, I don't care if you dig a hole and put a car tire in it and sit around it. I don't care." But President Nixon in 1972, December the 18th of 1972, President Nixon said, "I'm going to bomb you people back into the Stone Age." And for 18 hours, he flew over 3,000 sorties over North Vietnam. And a sortie, I believe, is one attack by one aircraft. And at the end of that day, they were ready to sign the peace agreements.
Good.
Yes, sir.
I just wondered where you were when you were in a prison camp in South Vietnam.
Where was I in the prison camps in South Vietnam? We were probably 20 to 30 miles west of Chu Lai. And Chu Lai was located about 50 miles south of Da Nang. We were in the jungle. We lived in the jungle for 37 months.
Yeah,
Hi, Donna. Oh.
when you got back to the PI and had your pizza and hamburger, did you throw up?
No. No. The only problem I had at the hospital in the Philippines was they were trying to get me to go to sleep because I missed my music. I can't drive anywhere without listening to music. I listen to Metallica, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC. You get me listening to old stuff, I'll go to sleep and kill myself. So I need stuff that boils my blood.
How
Yes, ma'am.
was just curious if you still stay in contact with any of the gentlemen that were released and what happened to the man with the hole in his neck.
Do I still stay in contact with the men that were released?
Yes.
I try talking to my pilot every now and then. And I don't do too well trying to get a hold of him. He lives in Satellite Beach, Florida. He's 4 years older than I am. Francis Cannon, the guy that I helped, clean his wounds, he was the first person that died. He was from Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
How much did you weigh at least? How much?
After I was released, how much?
No. Repeat the question. When you were in the camp, what did your weight get down to?
My weight got down to probably 123.
What'd you go in at?
148, 150.
What are you now?
Pardon?
What are you now?
We don't understand that. No, I'm almost 190 now.
I'm just kidding, I'm higher.
I'm 5'5". I'm almost like a bowling ball with feet sticking out of it. So, no.
Along that line, can you, because you told me before when I talked with you about how they fed you, can you talk about some of that? I think sometimes it's hard for us to understand the treatment you went through, and I think
Well, the treatment, the food, we had 3 little bowls of rice every day. And one day coming back on a food run, I saw this pepper tree. And I said, well, I'll just steal some peppers off this tree to spice up my rice. And I walked through these weeds to get these peppers. I got the peppers. And I stepped back and put the peppers in my little pouch and started walking back up the creek bed, and I felt something on my leg, and I thought it was a leech. And I looked down, and it was blood. I ran into a punji stake. And I ran about 3 inches in my leg above my kneecap. I didn't even feel it. And so I said, well, there's another rut row. But they like I said, they gave us pig fat about every 3 months, and whatever I saw crawling on the ground, I killed it, roasted it, and ate it. I didn't care what it was. But I've had, as far as physical, I've had 9 cases of malaria, 2 cases of dysentery, malnutrition, jungle rot, and beriberi. Now, I don't know what beriberi is. And I always say this as a joke. They say, well, do you know what beriberi is? I said, yeah, I was very sick. I said, that's the only beriberi I know. I don't know if it's what is it anyway?
We got 6 doctors in the center. I'd like them to answer.
I have no idea.
I think it's a vitamin deficiency, a B6 vitamin deficiency you get, if I recall. Is that right, Dr. Meyer? Okay, a B6 vitamin deficiency.
Well, I had that, so I was very deficient. So I had a bamboo splinter in my finger, and the Vietnamese witch doctor came down to the camp, and he says, anybody sick? And I stuck my hand up. My hand was about this big around. It was all pussed up. And he said, well, come with me. So I walked up to this little hooch, put my hand down on the table, and he grabbed a scalpel and just cut my finger open. No anesthetic, nothing. Took a pair of forceps and stuck in the incision and started pulling stuff out. And he pulled part of a nerve out of my left index finger. So I took it at that. This guy don't know what the hell he's doing, or, went back to my hooch. About a week and a half later, I was caught a little sickness. I don't know what it was. And he came down and said, anybody sick? I said, no, man, I'm good. I am good. I'm better than good. So I said, no, you're not hacking on me, buddy.
Bruce brought up food. Go ahead, Nat. But Bruce brought about food. There in 3 cups of rice, you got 17 grams of protein. the human being usually wants 60 grams a day. So one of those rats was a 63 grams. So every rat you got counts for some of your protein you needed. So
I killed as many as I could.
yeah, we've got a lot of protein that way. That pig fat every 3 months wasn't very much, but the human being likes a little bit of protein, and that rice wasn't sufficient enough for you.
Well, your body actually needs some fat, okay? But the rat, the first rat I killed, it looked like a cat. I mean, it was big. And I didn't tell most of the people I had killed it. I skinned it, everything, gutted it, just strictly the body and the legs. Roasted it and took it around to everybody, the other POWs. I said, "You want some meat?" And they said, "What is it?" I said, "Rat." And they went, "No, man, I'm not touching it." Then I go to the next person. "You want some meat?" "What is it?" "Rat." "No." I said, "Fine. I'll have a meal on my own."
What does rat taste like? It's all dark meat, not white meat.
It's almost like squirrel. I mean, they're the same family. I mean, one's a little bushier than the other one, but you get past that.
We got another question. Do you eat insects or anything else besides the rats?
Well, yeah, it didn't taste good at all. It really didn't. It was bitter. It was some type of bug. It was juicy, really big bug. Ugh. And I said, well, I might as well try this. And after I did, I spit it out. I said, that's the last time I tried it. So, but I ate these weeds that was on the other side of our fence. And my buddy says, what is that? I said, I don't know what it is. Some type of leaf. And I pull them through the, and I said, we just put them in a pot with some water and boil them, like spinach or whatever. He said, well, what if they're poison? I said, then I won't eat them again. I don't know what to tell you. What do you want me to tell you if they're poison?
I'm just curious, when you were there, did you, same time that John McCain was there?
Yes, but I never met John McCain. I was at the Hanoi Hilton. When they moved us up to my first camp in Hanoi, it was Plantation Gardens. And then they moved after a year, they moved us over to Hanoi Hilton, but they kept the pilots separate from us. But McCain went through he went through hell.
We got a couple other questions. Put the microphone to.
Do what?
Did you miss ice? Ice cubes?
Ice cube, did you miss ice cube?
No, not really, but missing cold water, yes. And that's where I got all the parasites. They'd say, let's boil our water first, wait till it cools, and then drink it. I said, no. I'm coming back from the food run, I'm drinking water that comes down our water line. Problem is, when I got back to Fort Knox after I was released, I had 8 different types of parasites. Some parasites were this long, and I can feel them. I don't know if they're playing soccer, rugby, or whatever they're doing, but I could feel them in my stomach. And they'd come in with this cup of milk of magnesia, and they said, drink this, this will get rid of X number of parasites. And I says, well, what's the side effects? I said, never had to give it out before. I said, oh, God. So I drank it. I went to talk to Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison. So after that, they come in with this great big horse pill, and they said, take this. This will get rid of the other parasites. And I said, what's the side effects? They said, well, I said, don't even go there. I said, just give me the pill. And it threw me out left field. So, but they got rid of the parasites. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we hear so much about the pilots that were released from the Hanoi Hilton, but what about were there any regular troops that were captured? How many?
Oh, sure.
We never hear anything about them.
Well, they mostly talked about the pilots in Vietnam. And I'm not saying this meaningful way, but I said pilots didn't fight the war by themselves. 58,700 some odd people, they weren't all pilots. Now the pilots, I praise those guys, you know, but there was also a lot of infantrymen and mortarmen and riflemen that fought the war.
They kept those troops, they kept those separate from the pilots? Or?
Well, in the plantation gardens, we had officers and enlisted in our camp. Plantation gardens, they threw us with the pilots, but one section of Hanoi Hilton was the pilots, and then our section was from the plantation gardens.
Were the lower level infantrymen and troops like that, were they tortured like the pilots were supposedly tortured?
Do what, sir?
Were the infantry and the other troops that were captured, were they tortured in the same manner as the pilots?
It depended on what you did. I mean, if you really ticked them off, they torture you. I don't. Did I mention that? You know, as a rule of thumb, sometimes if you're in a certain country 7 years, you can go ahead and apply for citizenship. Well, I was in Vietnam 6.5 years. So I was going to bring up to my captors, say, listen, just keep me 6 more months. And if they'd asked me, I'd have said, listen, I've been here 6.5 years. All I need is 6 more months and I can apply for citizenship. And they said, Pfister, that's sick. So, but like I said, this is how I get through my life. You know, if I can't laugh about it, then what's the use? You know, there's nothing. What I have learned over these years is dying is the easy part. It's very easy, dying. Think about that. It's the honest to God truth.
Did anybody communicate with folks back home?
I was listed as missing in action for 4 years. My dad, my cousins, my aunts and uncles had no idea was I alive or whatever until 4 years. Now, what's the reasoning? Well, we had 2 Puerto Ricans that was released when I got to my first camp in '68. In '69, we had 3 guys out of my camp that was released. It's a pawn, you know, play. They were told by the government not to contact any of the families whatsoever and let them know that you were still alive. Now, maybe they did this because when they got back and they talked to, say, my family, and they said, hey, your son Jim is alive. Well, what if 6 months later I die? And my dad and then my relatives are waiting for me to come home, and all I come home is in a box. When he said, and he told the families, your son's alive. So maybe that was the reasoning behind it. I don't know.
Could you tell us a little bit of the emotional experience you got?
Where's that coming from?
Right over here. Right here. Out here, out of the yellow thing. The emotional experience. You've got some family here. They might stand up and say what the emotional experience of seeing you back alive, the nostalgic feeling that the person that was gone, probably considered dead. Maybe your brother or your cousin could talk up.
Val Marie,
stand up there, one of you. Stand up. Okay, let her get her a microphone. Bill, get her a microphone. Wait a minute, don't talk till you get the microphone.
Hey.
What was the experience that you felt when little Jim came back, and what's your relation to him?
I just live here.
I'm his first cousin. We grew up together.
Closer to your mouth, the microphone.
I'm his first cousin. We grew up together. He's only 14 months older than I am. When we were notified that, first of all, he was alive, because honestly we thought after 6.5 years, not knowing anything, we really thought that he may be dead. When we were notified that he was alive, that was our reaction. My mom, his dad, we cried. That's all we could do was just thank God that he was coming back. When he was in Fort Knox, my brother Don and I and my husband Joe and Don's wife Fran, we drove down to meet him and to see him. He walked out from his room, and we were all standing there just waiting. And honestly, I just threw my arms around him and hugged him and continued to cry. Just to know that he was alive, that he was finally home, he was finally safe. That's all we could think about. He's still crazy. He always has been. Like I said, we grew up together. I know this guy, so. But that was our reaction. Just we were so thankful that he was alive, that he was relatively healthy, and that no missing parts. And that's just the way it was. And he was. How long were you in town?
Pardon?
How long were you in Evansville when you came back? 2 years? Something like that?
Not even that long.
Not even that long. But we saw him, and like I said, we were just grateful that he was there.
Thank you. We got some back here. Go ahead.
You, in your talk, you talked about...
Closer to the mouth.
Talked about communicating with the guards, and do they speak English? Did you learn any of their language?
Well, I learned a lot of their language. They didn't want to hear it. It was all of the non-proper words. And every time they saw me, I gave them the International Sign Language. That's why they called me unprogressive. I said, shoot me. I said, our interpreter, very, very, very fluent in English. You made us a camp rules. Can't do this, can't do that, can't do this, can't do that. A pretty big sheet of paper. Well, they come back one day off a supply run, and they didn't have the zigzag cigarette papers. They gave us cut tobacco, but no papers to roll them in. And they said, Pfister, what are we going to do? I went, camp rules. They said, I ain't touching those damn things. I said, well, I will. So I grabbed them off the wall and took the bamboo frame around them off and folded up the whole thing the size of zigzag papers and passed it out to everybody that smoked. Well, the interpreter come down one day and walked in our hooch and looked at the wall and went, what? What happened to the rule? I said, I smoked them. He said, what did you smoke them for? I said, because you didn't give us zigzag papers. I said, and until you give us zigzag papers, don't put any camp rules up there because they're going to get smoked. In the subject, Chief. Well, the next day he went on supply run. My God, they brought back a wagon full of them. I said, hey, I'm sorry, you captured me. I didn't ask you for this. You captured me, by God, you take care of me. Well, that didn't work either because they didn't sign the Geneva agreements. So, but I mean, you can only, I relayed my grief, that I had about that with them, so.
You mentioned that you went in as a clerk. Did you have any survival training? I reflect on the fact that my uncle, who was a World War II B-17 pilot, got shot down. And he said his survival training came because he was an Eagle Scout, not because what he received as a soldier. But did you have any kind of survival training, or did you just learn this all on your own?
My survival training came from me living with my grandparents for 14 years. They were poor. No, Everything that I worked for, everything that I wanted, I went out and worked for. My buddy Charles Hinton used to live down the street. He come over one day to visit, and he said, "What are we going to do today?" I said, "Let's go to a movie." He said, "Do you have any money?" I went, "No." I said, "Well, we'll get some though." So on the way to the theater, we'd leave about 2.5, 3 hours early. We'd be walking down the street, we'd see somebody's yard that needed cutting. We'd go in and ask them if they wanted their yard cut. We'd use their mower, we'd cut grass. By the time we ended up getting into the movie, we had more money than we knew what to do with. So I told Charles, I said, "Where there's a will, there's a way. You want something, go after it."
Pretty good.
You know?
Did you do any hunting and cleaning your game and such like this? Did you have that kind of a background?
No. I don't hunt now, but over in Vietnam, I knew that if you want to clean this snake, you want to cut the head off if it has fangs. I knew that much. I had enough G2 up there to figure that one out.
Did you have traps? To catch a mouse or a rat in my house or something else is a real chase.
Well, now I got to tell you, my son called me one day. My son's a captain with the Evansville Fire Department. Stand up there, Jimmy. My son called me one day and said, "Pop, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm killing this mouse." I had a mouse in the pantry, but I've got glass bottles in there, and I saw this thing, and I went after it with a hammer. So I was fixing to have glass everywhere. So I finally went and bought a mouse trap. I got it. It takes me a while to catch on, but I'll get there. So.
Jim, I've got the Geneva Convention rules in front of me. I think they were made I'm over here, in 1929, but this is the 1941 version. And it's pretty long, but the first rule is humane treatment of prisoners. Number one, civilians and captured combatants, which is you, must be treated humanely, protecting against murder. You weren't murdered, you're still here. Torture, you didn't talk too much about that. Mutilation, just your finger and your leg, but that was sort of your fault. Cruel and degrading treatment.
This whole world's my fault.
Did you have any torture? Did you see anybody? You talk about the Geneva Convention when you're in prison?
When they threw me in solitary the first time, they hit me and kicked me with rifle bullets.
Adjust your microphone close to your mouth.
Hello.
Thank you.
They kicked me and hit me with rifle butts, and I said, "Oh, God, you really hurt me, people." And smiled at them, and they slammed the door. Then the second time I went in, they put me in leg irons for 5 days. I had a bar that went across the back of my feet, and a U-bolt that went on top, and then locks. And the bar pressed up against both of my Achilles tendon in both feet. So when I went to sleep, when I turned, my legs were like this. I couldn't pull my legs in. So at the end of 5 days, they came in and said, "Well, you can go back to your room." And I stood up and took one step and fell over. And they had to go back to the room and get some of my fellow POWs, carry me back to the room. That much pressure on my Achilles tendon, it stopped me. I couldn't walk. So it took me a couple of days, before I could even walk. But at that point, when I went into solitaire, I was determined to give them hell until whenever. And I knew that I was there for the duration, forever, how long that took. I told myself, I say, "They're not burying me in this place. Not if I have anything to do with it." But I don't know if it was stubbornness or it may have been a little bit of that. I don't know.
It also says in
But they ask me, they tell me in basic training, if you're captured, you only give your name, rank, serial number, and date of birth. Well, that doesn't work. So my first interrogation, oh, this was a hoot. My first interrogation, they had a little table sitting out there in front with a pistol on it. Was it loaded? I don't know. Really didn't care. And the guy says, who's your commanding officer and executive officer? I answered your question. So he said, who? And I said, Clark Kent and Perry White. He wrote down a piece of paper and sent me back to my hooch. Get the monkey off your back. Now, if they learned about Superman, I'm in trouble. I'm in deep trouble. But apparently it worked because the idiot didn't know what, you know. So, yeah.
Repeat the question.
We didn't have snow, but we had 6 inches of rain every hour when monsoons hit. Monsoons are terrible. When they say the rain's coming, it's going to get you. Yes, ma'am.
How'd you find out that the war was ending with that?
Then they come in and told us. Then they put us in groups. And when I was released, I had viral pneumonia. And in the room, there were 32 of us in the room, and we were sleeping on pallets on cement foundations. And they said, here he comes. And they had to help me sit up in the bed. I couldn't even sit up by myself. And when we got on the plane, you know, to be released, and they escorted us to the plane, the nurse came by and gave me sort of a short physical, and I had viral pneumonia. And I told him, I said, I ain't telling these idiots I got pneumonia or sick. The hell, they don't want to release sick POWs. So I says, I'm good. I'm good. Get me out of this place. I don't want to spend another 5 minutes in this place.
It says you're supposed to have proper clothing. What kind of clothes did you wear? And when you slept, did you have a bedspread or a pillow?
We had a blanket the thickness of a sheet. I had my jungle boots until I literally wore the soles and heels out of them. Then they gave me these rubber sandals. And that's where I walked up to North Vietnam in. Now, I don't know if they were Firestone or Uniroyal or Goodyear, but I got some good wear out of them. They lasted me 500 miles.
What kind of clothes did you wear?
Pajamas. And in the wintertime, the cool season, the pajamas just weren't warm enough.
Did you have any dental work done when you were there?
Oh, God, no.
But that could be a major problem for all those prisoners. Didn't some of those prisoners have dental problems? I mean,
well, yeah, we all did. Well, you know what? There was a funny thing. I went down a few years ago for cataract surgery. And they did my right eye, and they said, come back in 2-3 weeks, we'll do the left eye. I said, okay. So I go back, I go to the dentist, the optometrist there in Carmine, lay on his table, and he looks at my left eye and he says, uh-oh. I said, hey, there's no uh-oh in eye surgery. No. He said, when did you damage your left eye? I said, I didn't damage my left eye. He said, yeah, you did. I said, no, I didn't. Don't argue with me. I said, it didn't damage my left eye. He said, well, the orbit that your eye sits in is broken. I said, well, I was in a helicopter crash. He said, recently? I said, yeah, 1968. I said, that's recent, yeah. That's as recent as I know. It's the only helicopter crash I've been in. So, he says, well, I have to put 3 stitches in your eye to sew it back into the socket or your orbit. And I went, you're joking. Jesus. I said, my God Almighty, I'll never have this done again. So yeah, I've had a few physical challenges, you know, but it's surgery on my back. They got a titanium plate in my neck. They did a spinal fusion, and the doctor said, you play sports? I says, Yeah? He said, what? I said, I golf. He said, no golf for 6 weeks. I said, you're joking. I said, hell, it's my livelihood. I cut grass and play golf. That's all I do. And he said, well, I just put 4 screws in your neck to fuse those 2 vertebrae. And I said, oh, no, I get it. I said, I understand. He said, do you really? I said, yeah. I said, if I go out and play golf and swing a golf club and one of the screws comes out, my butt will fall off. He said, go home, Pfister. Just go home. Get out of here. Just go home. So other than that, you know, that's...
Any other questions in Jim Jr. or Jim the Third? Do you have any comments? This is Jim, nothing else to say but remarkable father, remarkable experience.
Don't ask me to go car shopping.
Yeah. All right, any other questions in the crowd? So hope to see you next week with Don Ballard. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.